Make no mistake, the MacBook Air M2 is coming. The MacBook Air M1 sold an insane amount of machines, way more than the MacBook Pro when it was released. It was lighter, it was thinner, and the performance was the same. I didn't get the idea of putting an M1 chip into the MacBook Pro lineup because that was just silly. It was more expensive. Yeah, you had the fan for thermal throttling, which would stop that from happening. Apart from that, the Air was such a better choice. But those who bought the MacBook Air M1, will they care about the M2? Will they want to upgrade? There's also these MacBook Pro M2s allegedly coming out next month. Is it worth it for them to upgrade? Let's find out. The biggest thing about the M2 chip is that it's going to be better than the M1 chip. It's going to have a few performance cores, a few extra graphic cores, which will make a difference, but not a massive difference, because the big jump in chips were the M1 Max and the M1 Pro chips. They were supposed to be the bigger jump. So when the M2 comes, it's not going to be a leap from that. It's going to be a leap from the original M1. So obviously you can see Apple will have incoming M2 Max and M2 Pro chip. It's predictable, at least for the next year or so. Now, in terms of the MacBook Air M2 itself, it's meant to be thinner and lighter than the current version. Now, the tapered design apparently will be gone, and it will sport a similar design to the MacBook Pro lineup with a uniform sort of look to it. Now, I do wish the MacBook Air M2 has less sharp edges. I mean, they're not so smooth that I can cut myself on, but they're a bit uncomfortable. I mean, when I put both my hands, my wrists on it, it's just like, feels like they're going to cut, but I know they're not, but I would prefer them a bit smooth. There are also rumors about the colors. I mean, colors are fun, but I wouldn't choose anything other than silver or space gray. I mean, call me boring, but I believe MacBook looks best in those colors straight off. In fact, any Apple device does. Graphite's not a bad color as well. My iPad Pro is graphite. In terms of display, there were rumors of ProMotion being introduced, but this may not happen. The notch is there. I hate notches, but you get used to them, particularly with the iPhone. It does ruin the look. I mean, you can hide it by going into the options and fiddling about, but I still know it's there. That's going to be the irritating thing for me. With the notch, thankfully comes a 1080p camera. Now, they had the 720p in the Intel MacBook Airs before the M1 was released, and it was rubbish considering we were all working from home, well, most of us were working from home. And then the M1 kept the 720p camera, but they used a bit of software to enhance it a little bit. And it was better, but nowhere near the kind of quality that comes in the iPhones or even the iPads. Now, I would like to see a stronger screen that isn't going to smash. Problem is, because the MacBook Air M2 will be thinner and lighter, chances are probably not, because there'll be less structure reinforcing that screen. But considering the lawsuit Apple has, I don't know what the result of that is. That could take years to sort of come to fruition. They might do something about it. I hope they don't compensate too much on the glass panel, but then looking at, for example, the ThinkPads, they haven't got a glass panel. They've got a plastic one, but it's fantastic. Not as good as the MacBooks, but it's almost as good. I mean, if Apple were to go down that route, that's a possibility, but I don't know how many people would like that. In terms of ports, they're still going to have the two Thunderbolt ones. The only annoying thing I have is the two Thunderbolt ports are on one side, so if I want to use my other side for something, I can't. Especially those of you who are putting a dock in. And if you still want to do some other stuff on the other side, it's not going to work, especially if your cables get away tangled, especially if the plug socket for your outlet is on another side. I found I have to sort of readjust my position or just buy a longer cable. It can be a little irritating. You kind of need one on the other side. In terms of SD ports and things like that, it's the MacBook Air version. It's not going to have that. That will be in the Pro. Otherwise, the MacBook Air, who's going to buy the Pro then? You're going to buy the Air instead. Now, the next thing to mention is gaming, but it's not so much hardware, because the hardware is more than capable of handling it. I want Steam to work on Mac. I don't know how likely that is in the near future, particularly as now Valve is focusing on the Steam Deck, which looks awesome, by the way. I did put a poll up on who was thinking of ordering it, because I'm thinking of ordering it. Everything so far shows it's good, except for the full library not being able to play. But anyway, MacBooks, I can't see them playing more Steam games as of yet, but it would be great if it would. But it's really limited on the gaming side, and it forces me to look at Windows options when I want to game. Now, the interesting thing is the MacBook Pro M2 is rumored to be released next month, March the 8th. Or announced at least, and released however quickly they want to release it. And it's supposed to have the M2 chip, no notch, similar design, pretty much the same as it was with the previous 13-inch, but it's got the M2 chip. Now, that might be appealing for M1 users if they're looking to upgrade, because one, you get a better chip in the M2. Two, you get the fan, which will mean no thermal throttling if you find the performance of the M1 isn't enough. The third point is that you get something that's 13 inches. Oh, and if you like the MacBook Pro's design, it is a bit thicker, which means no screen shattering. Fingers crossed for that one. But the only downside, obviously, is it's going to be £300 more. It's going to be that much extra, £300, $300 more. It's going to be that much extra. I am quite curious to see what it brings, because Apple are clearly holding off the MacBook Air M2 because of how well it's sold. And this is probably that bridge, that stopgap, because they know people want to see how the M2 performs. A lot of the market has no use for an M1 Max or an M1 Pro chip, and coupled with the price, which is the price of, I don't know, 3 people's rent all at once, not a lot of people, I imagine, would have wanted to get it. Now their sales are up because people are buying it. Comments I've seen and just people I know, no one has gone for it unless you have a specific need for that kind of raw power. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below about it. Are you interested in the MacBook Pro M2? Are you still looking at the MacBook Air M1? Are you going to wait out for the MacBook Air M2? This is the thing about technology. If you keep waiting for the next one, you're going to have nothing in the meantime. And I'm pretty sure that the MacBook Air M1 is going to last a while. I don't think it's going anywhere just yet. But yeah, let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, and until next time.